Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. Smoke and mirrors. A phrase which conjures images of magicians and sleight of hand. Can also be used to describe the functionality of an EM gun game. These games typically had a rifle stock pointed at a back glass, in which was a window where you could peer in and view a diorama, which was set up inside the machine. In this diorama, there would be moving targets, typically. These moving targets were on motorized chains and would move about inside the diorama. Now, what's really interesting about EM gun games is that you were actually not viewing the item directly. When you put in your coin, you would be given a certain number of shots. This would actually fire up the motors and would light up the diorama. You would be able to see it only because there was a mirror which would point towards the diorama. So you're fairly far removed from the actual thing that you're pointing at with the gun. When you squeeze the trigger, it would count down your shots remaining and add points if you actually hit something. The way that these guns worked, since you weren't pointing directly at the thing and it wasn't shooting a projectile, were fairly unique. There was a phenolic disc, basically a bakelite plate, underneath the panel that the stock was mounted to. On this were a set of rivets, and as you moved the gun left and right, up and down, it would apply pressure and allow electricity to flow through the various rivets on this plate. When you squeeze the trigger, the game would know, based on hidden switches and the like, where the targets were lined up and know if you actually scored a hit. If you were familiar with the game and knew it was out of adjustment, you would know that when the ghost or bear or whatever it was ran past, even though your gun was not pointing directly at it, if you squeezed the trigger at this particular time, pointed where it was 2 seconds ago, you would score a hit. So the adjustment on these involves lifting up the field where the stock is attached and figuring out which contacts are the ones which will shoot that particular target. Once you've figured that out, there are adjustments underneath to the plate which allow you to make it so that the gun is actually aiming at the thing you're trying to shoot. So the cabinets on these are fairly interesting. They're upright, as in, a classic 80s solid-state video game. However, they're a little bit deeper, and they have what amounts to a pedestal in the front. Some cabs that I've seen have fold-down stairs, which allow for a young child to climb up and play the game. The prominent manufacturers of these gun games were Williams and Midway. However, most of the pinball and amusement manufacturers tried their hands at making these gun games at various times. Now, there are other types of gun games which actually fire a projectile, but we're talking about the ones which have no projectile at all. Another interesting thing about these games are the sound effects. Some would ring a bell when you reached a score threshold or when you hit a target. Others had an 8-track player which would play clips based on the target that you hit or would play constantly when you fired up the game. Of course, over time, the 8-track, though a rugged tape playing mechanism, the tape inside will wear down, and sometimes it must be replaced entirely. There are folks who have transcribed and digitized these gun game sounds, most notably Clay Harrell, although there are others who have done this as well, and you can find them on the internet, download them, and rig up a solid-state replacement for the 8-tracks. There are also folks that sell original 8-tracks, like John Robertson at flippers.com. John's Jukes. He has a stock of some original 8-tracks for these gun games. Chicago Coin, Genko, Williams, all of these manufacturers made the gun games, but Midway was one of the masters. In my score reel episodes, I talk about those motorized score reels that Midway used in their EM arcade games. Well, these gun games use these motorized score reels. They're clutch driven. They have a small nylon coupling which can break, but they're really nothing to fear, and they probably should be cleaned if you get one of these games, in order to not only improve the movement of the mechanism, but also to ensure proper scoring. They're really nothing to be afraid of. They just require patience and dedication to clean. And once they're cleaned, they should serve for an additional 40, 50 years. So it's well worth the time if you're going to the trouble of restoring operation to one of these games to clean the score reels. That's my public service announcement for today. Some of these gun games also had multiple stocks. Chicago Coin in particular was notable for doing this, most famously with their game Twin Rifle. But they made a whole series of twin gun games, and those are highly collectible and allow you to compete with a friend. And as Gottlieb said, it's more fun to compete. Well, thank you very much for joining me. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com. And you can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter, at Bingo Podcast. You can find me on Instagram at nbaldridge. And you can listen to us on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.